Picture this. You've poured months, maybe even years of literal blood, sweat, and tears into your vines. You've pruned, you've prepped, and you're finally at harvest time, only to find sour, shriveled berries that completely refuse to ripen. It's heartbreaking, right? Welcome to This Explainer. If that scenario sounds all too familiar, you're in the right place, because today, we are going to fix it.
So, it all comes down to this one agonizing question. Why won't my perfectly good grapes ripen? Believe me, it is the single most common pain point for vineyard managers and home growers alike. But here's the really good news. Grape ripening isn't magic. It's just a biological equation. And by tapping into the latest viticulture research, we're going to solve this mystery together. So, let's dive right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. Think of this as our ultimate vineyard detective checklist. We'll be looking at the grape ripening mystery, environment and grape variety, soil and potassium impact, vine health and diseases, canopy and vine maintenance, and we'll wrap it all up with some expert tips for success.
All right, part 1, the grape ripening mystery.
Before we can figure out why things go wrong, we really need to establish what a normal, healthy ripening cycle actually looks like. The ripening period is that absolutely essential window between veraison, which, is that magical moment when the grapes first start changing color, and harvest. Normally, during this time, your berries should double in size, soften up, deepen in color, and really pack on the sugar. But what's super interesting is the structural stuff. The main stems or canes actually need to become woody and cold hardy, which is a process called lignification. It's this highly coordinated, beautiful cascade of biological events. But if anything interrupts this delicate sequence, the whole system just crashes, and that's when you get striking disorders like berry shriveling.
Moving right along to part 2, environment and grape variety.
We really have to talk about how shifting environments interact with the specific genetics of your grapes. Climate change is kind of throwing a massive wrench into our vineyards. Under normal conditions, vines experience this steady, balanced sugar development that perfectly aligns with their natural timeline, whether you're growing an early ripening Pinot Noir or a late ripening Cabernet. But when you introduce elevated temperature stress, things go drastically wrong. As global warming shifts ripening periods earlier into those scorching midsummer months, extreme heat and drought literally decouple the anthocyanins, those are the compounds responsible for color, from the sugars. Basically, the vine panics. This leads to growth arrest or severe dehydration. You end up with fruit that has highly concentrated sugar but tastes completely bland and out of balance. And if you're growing early ripening varieties in these hotter zones, this dangerous decoupling happens even faster.
Okay, let's dig a little deeper into part 3, soil and potassium impact.
You really can't talk about sugar accumulation without talking about the ultimate biological transport vehicle in your vines. I absolutely love this quote from the Penn State Extension because it usually shocks people. Mature grapes may have almost twice as much potassium as nitrogen. We spend so much time obsessing over nitrogen fertilizers, right? But during ripening, grape berries are a massive sink for potassium, and it mostly accumulates right there in the berry skin tissues.
Just to put that into perspective for a second, 11 pounds. That is the amount of potassium contained in just one single ton of mature grapes. That's a staggering amount of mineral transport happening right under our noses.
But managing that potassium is a really delicate balancing act. If you have excessive potassium in your soil, it drives up the juice pH, which completely sabotages your wine quality and leaves it tasting totally flabby. But on the flip side, if you're deficient in potassium, the vine physically cannot transport sugar into the berries. It just stops ripening, dead in its tracks. So blindly throwing fertilizer at your vines without doing a soil test first, that's a super common mistake and honestly, a recipe for absolute disaster.
That brings us to part 4, vine health and diseases.
Sometimes your soil and weather are perfectly dialed in, but you've got invisible pathogens lurking in the background. What's crucial here is learning how to diagnose exactly what kind of shrivel you're actually dealing with out in the field. Take bunch stem necrosis, or BSN. This is usually triggered by canopy shading or cold weather. Now compare that to sour shrivel, which is also known as sugar accumulation disorder, or SAD. With SAD, your berries can have 70 to 80% less sugar and taste incredibly sour. So how do you play detective and tell the difference? Look at the main stem holding the grapes, called the rachis. In BSN, that stem dies and turns brown. But in SAD, the rachis remains perfectly green and healthy, even while the berries themselves are shriveling up. That is your key diagnostic clue. And we definitely can't ignore viruses. The classic visual symptoms of grapevine leaf roll virus include delayed bud break and the margins of leaves literally rolling downwards, hence the name. You'll also see the areas between the major leaf veins turning red in red varieties or yellow in white varieties. So what does this actually mean for your harvest? It means high fruit acidity, persistently low sugar, and a vine that just will not grow to its full potential.
All right, we've covered the suspects. Time for the solutions in Part 5, Canopy and Vine Maintenance. This is where you get to take back control.
I want you to think of your grapevine canopy like a highly calibrated array of solar panels. Dr. Richard Smart developed these brilliant metrics for what he calls the ideal canopy. Notice the 1-to-1 ratio for canopy height to row width. This is huge because it ensures your rows aren't casting long shadows on each other. You ideally want a north-south row orientation for nice, even sun exposure, vertical training systems, and crucially, 20 to 40% canopy gaps. Listen, if your canopy is just a solid, impenetrable wall of green, your fruit simply isn't getting the airflow or that dappled sunlight it absolutely needs to ripen properly.
But timing is absolutely everything here. Here's your essential management timeline. Step 1. Fruit zone leaf removal. You have to do this in the sweet spot between late bloom and when the berries are about pea-sized. Pull them too early and you ruin the fruit set. Pull them too late and you shock the newly exposed grapes, which causes severe sunburn. Step 2 is hedging, or trimming the tops of the shoots. You want to delay this at least 30 days after bloom so the vine keeps enough of those solar panels to feed the developing fruit.
We are in the home stretch now. Let's pull it all together in Part 6, Expert Tips for Success.
Let's rapid fire some actionable takeaways you can use right away. First, and honestly, this is a real game changer. If you have north-south rows, concentrate your leaf removal entirely on the east side. This gives your grapes that gentle morning sun, but it completely protects them from the blistering, sunburn-inducing west afternoon sun. It's brilliant. Next, consider foliar sprays of magnesium and calcium right at Varicin. That'll help fight off bunch stem necrosis. Always, always match your rootstocks to your local soil's potassium levels. And finally, if spring frost is a major headache in your area, delay your winter pruning as long as you possibly can to push back bud break.
Just a quick heads up before we wrap. The viticulture data we've covered today is highly researched and very actionable. But as you know, farming is incredibly local. Your specific microclimate is everything. So always pair these strategies with advice from your regional agricultural experts to make sure you're doing what's right for your soil. And that is a wrap on today's Explainer. We've systematically cracked the mystery of why grapes don't ripen, tracking down culprits all the way from extreme heat and potassium imbalances to sneaky viruses and canopy shading. Now, it is your turn to step out into the vineyard. Which of these detective techniques are you going to experiment with on your vines this season? Are you going to finally test your soil's potassium, or maybe try out that east side leaf removal trick? Get out there, try applying these structured solutions, and hey, here's to a bountiful, perfectly ripened harvest.